Irrigation is the most important thing for your garden right after sunlight and good soil. So today I'm going to walk you through the best ways to keep any garden perfectly irrigated for no matter what you want to grow. We're going to compare 4 different irrigation systems that I've been testing for years, get into the nuts and bolts of drip irrigation, and show a wide variety of hose timers that come with a range of either simple or flexible features. Let me start things off by giving you a bit of context and welcome you to my garden.
I'm in Southern California in Zone 10A, but more importantly, I'm in a Mediterranean climate where we get regular rain in the winter, but otherwise it is incredibly dry, and so without regular irrigation, my garden would certainly struggle. Thankfully, it doesn't, and aside from establishing seedlings, I never manually water, and so let me show you all of the systems I use as well as upgrade some of them. Traditional drip irrigation is arguably the most affordable, reliable, flexible, and easy to set up system for irrigating your garden. You can set it up in a million different ways, but in my garden, I run 1/2-inch tubing all around the garden and either connect adjustable emitters directly into that tubing or run 1/8-inch tubing to locations where I need emitters. When I first ran the tubing many years ago, I relied heavily on soaker hose, and despite hearing from many sources that it eventually clogged, I decided to give it a go, and let me tell you now, it will eventually clog and become useless. Use sprayers, adjustable emitters, or pre-spaced tubing, but do not use small soaker hose. To set up a drip system based off of a spigot, you'll need a few pieces, but I'll show you that as well as some other clever contraptions later in the video when we upgrade my setup. You can easily do this for your entire garden, and I used to use it in all of my containers, but I've since upgraded to something easier. When I installed this raised bed in my side yard, I wanted to try something different than I've been using, and so I got a garden grid. It's basically the perfect drip irrigation layout for a raised bed, where all you have to do is plug it in. They come in a wide range of sizes to fit every bed, and while they're not as cheap as running, say, 3 lines of drip tubing, it is the perfect set it and forget it setup. You don't need a pressure reducer like you do with traditional drip systems. All you need to do is find the sweet spot on your spigot, put it on a timer, and then control it remotely, but we'll get to hose timers. An added benefit of this system is that it kind of forces you into square foot gardening, which is great for easy spacing. A few weeks ago, I built a new little raised bed, and since the garden grid works amazing on this larger one, I'm adding a new one. I already have a hose run over here, so all I needed to do was add on a manifold, which allowed me to connect my hose at the bottom and then connect both grids to that. All grids come with a little riser, which I used for my new one, and I also use stakes to temporarily hold it down as I'm getting everything situated, but I won't need that forever. I happen to have a short hose lying around that I cut down to connect the two, and now these are both ready to grow on the same timer and setup.
Now you might be thinking, if the garden grid is so perfect, why don't you use it for your whole garden?
Well, let's talk about oyas. There are 2 types of oyas that I use in my garden, and if you've never heard of oyas, they are effectively unglazed clay pots that you bury in your garden, and when you fill them with water, they gradually seep it out through their porous walls. Traditional oyas can either be DIY'd by gluing 2 clay pots together and sealing one of the holes, or you can get them ready-made like these ones. These are from Grow Oya, and I use them all over my garden where it was previously a bit tedious to run irrigation, and I've used them for years, and they are delightful. I have a few large ones on hand that I will eventually use for some fruit trees, but all of my small and medium-sized ones are buried and doing wonderful. They're great, but the only caveat is that you do have to fill them manually, which if you are able to be in your garden weekly and year-round, then they're great. But I travel somewhat frequently and often have weeks that I'm just not out here as much, which leads me to the irrigation system that I rely on most in my garden, the Thirsty Earth Automatic Oya system. These are also terracotta cups, but they're connected via drip tubing to a reservoir. This is a 99% pressure-based system, so the amount of water that makes its way to the cups is dependent on how high up the reservoir is relative to the top of the soil. I have these in 5 raised beds and in a wide variety of containers, and it is amazing because the cups are pretty much always full, and therefore if the soil needs water, it will get pulled out of the cups, but if the soil is nice and moist, then the water will stay in the cups. It won't be today, but I'm about to make some stands that raise these reservoirs up even higher as we get closer to summer here, but as you can see, anything that holds them up is just fine. The reservoirs can be filled manually, connected to a rain barrel, or hooked up to drip irrigation to autofill the reservoir. There is a float valve at the top of the reservoir that will stop the input of water once it's full, which means you can run your system to multiple reservoirs and not worry about anything overflowing. This system uses 61% less water than traditional drip lines and up to 80% less water than hand watering or sprinkler systems, but I honestly just love it because it is pretty much completely hands-off and gives all of my beds and containers exactly what they need. One proprietary system I forgot to mention is the automatic watering system that is in all of my earth boxes, which works in a somewhat similar way, where there's a sensor that is put into the tube that goes down into the reservoir, and once the reservoir is full, it stops taking in water, which means you can leave the system running 24/7 and it'll never overflow. I do have mine hooked up to a hose end timer, so I can occasionally give it a break during the winter and spring when regular water availability isn't as needed, but that brings me to the next most important arena of garden irrigation: hose end timers. A hose end timer is necessary because while you could plug a pressure reducer right into a spigot and then connect your drip irrigation, that would require you to come out and manually do it every single day, which kind of defeats the point of it all. At their most simple is something like this one from Rainpoint, which you can program with complete flexibility right on the display. If you need to turn it off during a rainy week, increase your frequency, or things of the sort, you need to come out and make those changes manually. It's not a huge deal or the end of the world, but there are also smart timers wherein all of the tweaks are made on your phone, which is nice because you're able to make changes to your schedule at any time and in any location. And I've been halfway around the world when there is a heat wave, and I was able to add on an extra early morning watering with the click of a button. The only flaw in my setup right now is the number of smart timers I have, which is why I'm going to be setting up a new 4-zone timer with you today. This 4-zone timer is from Lumery, and it has the added functionality of being solar powered, which means I never have to replace the batteries, which I have been guilty of forgetting about before, only to find out that my raised beds or wherever I'm irrigating is a little drier than usual. It also doesn't require a hub, which a lot of my other timers do, which is one less thing to set up. I've honestly been procrastinating setting up my zones in a smarter way, but today we are changing that together. Being that hose end timers like this are always on at the spigot, you really want to make sure that there is no dripping, so a little plumber's tape is a wise addition, particularly at this point where the timer meets the spigot or where you have a hose reel that is always on. On my old timers, I had one zone for all of my drip irrigation, which included all of my reservoirs, one of my garden towers, and all of the plugs by my garage. On the other zone was this set of earth boxes, and then on another timer was my other garden tower, which had a different type of irrigation system that I'm changing over now that I've added another garden tower, and I'd like for all three of them to be the same. With my new 4-zone setup, I'll have all of my reservoirs be zone 1, my garden towers be zone 2, my traditional drip lines be zone 3, and my earth boxes zone 4. I went to the store earlier this morning and got all the parts I needed, wherein I was going to add a pressure reducer to each point and then run multiple lines of 1/2-inch tubing, but then I remembered how I'd set up my garden grids, wherein I adjusted the pressure at the spigot before it got to the timer. So with the help of this water pressure gauge, I set the pressure to about 30 psi, and I was able to return all the parts I got and instead just get a new roll of tubing, which was way cheaper. I installed a new run of tubing so I could start fresh with my drip irrigation, because while you can easily plug old connectors in 1/2-inch tubing by using goof plugs, at a certain point a few can start to leak. And the cheapest part of drip irrigation is the tubing, so if you can just replace it, just replace it. I ran this all the way to the end of my garden and then reused my existing pressure reducer and compression connector. For my garden towers, I used a push to connect fitting here at the hose timer and then ran 1/8-inch tubing over to my towers and then up to these rings I made with adjustable emitters on them. This little DIY irrigation ring worked amazing for my first garden tower, so having all three on the same system will be wonderful consistency. My earth boxes were pretty easy, and all I needed to do was add a little jumper hose because there's no way to spin the pressure reducer that comes with their automatic watering system. For my reservoirs, I fully utilize push to connect fittings, and let me tell you, these are amazing and so quick to set up. They come in a million different shapes and sizes, and in comparison to the other 3 zones that I set up today, this took maybe 2 minutes total, which was a breath of fresh air. Setting up the timer on my phone was a breeze, and having all 4 zones controllable in the same app is amazing. Generally, I irrigate in the early morning, and then during the summer I add a bit of irrigation right as the sun is going down. But now that everything is separate, I can observe and play with different timings, and I'll likely set up my reservoirs to fill it more regularly, particularly during the heat of summer.
As you can see, there's a wide variety of ways to irrigate your garden, no matter if it's all containers, in-ground, raised beds, or what have you. There's an option for every price point and needed feature, and if you're looking for where to find these, I'll put them down in the description. And while all of these irrigation systems are really fun and packed with features, I also want to say that if you love going out into your garden every morning or evening and watering things manually, that's totally okay. I have a lot of friends who are gardeners who love the free therapy that is provided by just going out and tending to your plants, and I think that that's fantastic. If you already have a garden and a system that's working well for you, feel no pressure to add or change things up just for the sake of novelty. All that to say, I hope that this video was helpful to you, and if you have any questions about any of the systems that I've used, the way that I've set things up, or anything of the sort, feel free to drop a comment and I'll try and help you out. As always, it helps me out a lot if you can both like this video and subscribe to the channel if you want to learn more about all things gardening. This has been Aaron, aka Garden Zaddy, and I'll see you on the next one.